The time for 2-minute statements has expired. We'll move to question time. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, President. President, my question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. I refer the Minister to the column written by former Labor State Secretary and former Labor Chief of Staff Cameron Milner in The Australian today, marking the anniversary of the tragic death of our former colleague Kimberley Kitching. Is Mr Milner correct that there still has not been an investigation into allegations of workplace bullying?
Senator Wong.
What a career highlight for you. What about all those barlays, guys?
I'm going to ask for order, and I expect there to be order. Minister.
Thank you, President. This week is the anniversary of Senator Kitching's passing, and I would express again that our thoughts are with her loved ones as that anniversary approaches. It is, as I said in the condolence speech, I think I and many others in this place understand what it is to lose someone you love, and how anniversaries are difficult. Senator Kitching was someone who was deeply interested in Australia's place in the world, and I believe she would be very proud of what this Labor government is doing. She's greatly missed by many, including many of her colleagues, and by her family. I have responded to these matters at length previously, including the question you raise, and I'd refer you to those answers.
Senator Birmingham, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. Will the Prime Minister act on Mr Milner's call for an open and independent investigation into the bullying claims?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Senator Wong.
As I said in my earlier answer, I've responded, and as has the Prime Minister, prior to the election, to these matters, and I'd refer you to those answers.
Senator Birmingham, second supplementary.
President, can the Minister please put on the record why has the Prime Minister refused to undertake an open and independent investigation?
Senator Wong.
These matters were traversed in great detail prior to the election, including publicly, and I would refer you to the many answers which were given.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Payman.
My question is to Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Can the Minister update the Senate on how the government is delivering on its commitment to establish 50 Medicare urgent care clinics across Australia to improve access to health care for all Australians?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Payman, and thank you very much for the question and the opportunity to talk about something that Australians are deeply interested in, which is the strength of the Australian healthcare system and, in particular, the Medicare system. Australians expect and deserve access to quality and affordable healthcare, and that is what our government and those on this side are seeking to deliver, because we are the party of Medicare. We are the party of Medicare, and we have always supported Medicare, unlike those opposite who we know historically opposed Medicare, and have had grudgingly over the years to start to tell people that they actually support it because they knew it was politically unsustainable for them to continue to oppose it. So 4 decades on, the party that created Medicare is strengthening it. We promised at the election that we would deliver 50 Medicare urgent care clinics, and we are delivering. We are delivering. Expressions of interest have opened, and the first of the clinics will be treating patients this year. They will offer bulk billed services and open for extended hours. You hate this, don't you? You hate this. You hate this. You really hate Australians getting access to better health care. The fact that people actually believe that a public health system is a good thing. It's anathema to the Liberal Party, isn't it? And they don't want to know. They don't want to know how this government is strengthening to it. And let's remember, this is a party who is led by a man who cut $50 billion from hospitals. Peter Dutton, as Health Minister, $50 billion cut from hospitals, tried to introduce a $7 GP tax and secretly launched—
and Senator Ruston. Order. Senator Payman, first supplementary. Sorry.
Nationals, our 50 urgent care clinics will help take the burden off public hospitals.
Order. Senator Payne. I have a senator on her feet waiting to ask a question, and I'm waiting for silence. Senator Payne.
Can the minister update the Senate on how the Albanese government is working with states and territories to strengthen access to primary care?
Minister Wong.
Thank you to Senator Payman for the question. And of course, we on this side understand that the pandemic made clear that governments need to work together to deliver the care Australians deserve. That's why our government is committed $100 million to co-develop and pilot innovative ways to improve care with states and territories. In Queensland, the government is using the funding to expand its Care Collective initiative. This will improve coordination in the health system, specifically for people living with chronic and complex healthcare needs. In Western Australia, the Nurse Practitioner and Team-Based Care Pilot will fund 20 nurse practitioners over 2 years. Practitioners who will work with other— I'll take the interjection from the other side. I would have thought you'd be interested. I would have thought you'd be interested in what's happening in Western Australia and Queensland, but clearly not. These practitioners will work with other health professionals to diagnose and treat a wide range of health conditions, and their services will be free.
Senator Payman, second supplementary.
Can the minister update the Senate on how else the government is delivering on its commitment to strengthen Medicare after 10 years of neglect and mismanagement by the Liberals and Nationals?
Thank you, Senator Wong.
Thank you, Senator. The government is strengthening Medicare, which is required after 9 years of cuts and neglect, and we've set up the Strengthening Medicare Task Force to help better support patients with ongoing and chronic illness. We have already committed $750 million to deliver the highest priority investments in primary care in line with the recommendations of the task force. But after a decade of failure, there is a lot of work to do. There is a lot of work to do, because those opposite left Australians with $1 trillion of debt and nothing to show for it. Hospitals left under strain, medical staff exhausted, the bulk billing system on the verge of collapse, and out-of-pocket costs skyrocketing. Well, I suppose we should expect nothing more, nothing better, from a man who was described as Australia's worst health minister. Mr Dutton, Australia's worst health minister. This is the man who now leads Mr Morrison's Liberal leftovers.
Thank you, Minister.
That's the opposition of today.
Thank
Mr
you,
Morrison's
Minister. Your
Liberal.
time has expired. Senator Wong. Thank you. Senator Brockman, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Yesterday, the Assistant Treasurer could not rule out that if a family farm is an asset in a self-managed super fund, the owners could be forced to pay tax on that farm if it increased in value during a particular financial year. Minister, can you confirm that your government is proposing to tax super fund assets such as the family farm where there has only been an increase in its value on paper?
Thank you.
Just a moment.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Senator Brockman, who was the question to? Oh, beg your pardon. Sorry, Senator Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Brockman for the question. I've answered this a number of times this week. Yes, I have. Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
Minister, please,
You have asked
Minister
the
Gallagher,
same question a number of times.
Senator Watt. Senator Watt, I've just sat the minister down because there's too many interjections. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. Yes, I have been asked this. I've been asked it in various ways. Yes, I have. Superannuation is based on individual accounts. If your account has more than $3 million in it, of which we know is a very small part of the overall numbers of superannuation accounts, then we are increasing or decreasing the concessional arrangements on those high balance accounts, right? So if you have an asset in your super account, you are still required, under the prudential arrangements, to have a diversified portfolio.
That would have been the case under your government.
And you earn income that tips you over the $3 million threshold, then you will pay a concessional rate of 30% instead of 15% on the earnings over $3 million. Now, this would cover people
Senator
who have
Starr.
a farm as part of their asset, or it might include other property that they might have in their super funds. I think that is the answer I give. That is the answer I've given all week, and that is the position we've taken through these super changes. But I would note again that the average super balance in this country is $150,000. To have a dignified retirement is in the order of $565,000. That is what superannuation is for, to allow for a dignified retirement. This is making a modest
Minister.
change
Your time
for a
has
very
expired. Senator, I'm going to wait for quiet. I have a senator on his feet. Senator Ruston. Senator Brockman, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Minister, for that 1 minute and 30-second yes. Minister, the Assistant Treasurer recently likened the $3 trillion in superannuation funds in Australia as honey, which he wants to spread around for the good of the hive. Do you believe that accounts are the property of the individual account holder, or do you believe, or do you agree with the Assistant Treasurer that they are a
Senator
honeypot
Brockman, your
for the
time
government
has
to spread?
expired. Minister Gallagher.
I think I got the gist of it. Superannuation. Okay.
I'm going to sit. Minister, please resume your seat. I'm going to wait until the interjections have stopped from both sides of the chamber. Senator McKenzie. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. Superannuation accounts are individual accounts owned by individual members, which are subject to taxation, as they currently are. They are. Superannuation currently has tax arrangements that apply to it. The change that we are making is for a very small amount of
Senator
people who are
McGrath.
fortunate enough to have more than $3 million in their accounts, that they pay a concessional rate of 30% on earnings over $3 million. It's a very modest change to the arrangements that have been put in place. But as people in this place know, superannuation is based on individual accounts.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Birmingham.
President, the minister spent 95% of her answer responding to really the primary question still and the general thesis around the government superannuation changes. On relevance, the supplementary question went specifically to the words of the Assistant Treasurer, which she should reject, that it is not a honeypot to be spread around the nation.
Senator Birmingham, as order. I'm responding to a point of order. As I understand the question, it did have the honey definition in it, but the senator was also asked directly if senator accounts, superannuation accounts were individual. So I believe she's being relevant, but I will continue to listen. Minister, you've finished. Senator Brockman, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Minister, yesterday in question time, when asked to categorically rule out any further changes to the superannuation taxation system in this parliament, you said, and I quote, "The government has made it clear that this is the only change to superannuation taxation during this term." Considering during the 22 election campaign, Mr Albanese said we've had no intention of making any changes to super. How can the Australian people trust the commitment you gave yesterday?
Thank you, Senator Brockman. Minister.
Thank you. Well, my answer yesterday was correct. I stand by that answer. And I would say that the Australian people realise that they have a government that's making responsible and difficult decisions after we inherited a budget mess from those opposite. That is what the Australian people think. They want a government that shows up that deals with the challenges, that explains the decisions we take and why we take them. And we're taking them because we've got a $50 billion structural budget problem in this country. We have $1 trillion in debt that was the debt that was doubled before the pandemic hit. We've got increasing pressures on our budget, including in national security and defence, and in health, and in hospitals, and in aged care. All of those areas, increasing pressures. And unlike you, we don't think the budget is this magic pudding that you use for yourselves
Your time
without
has
explaining
expired. Order. Minister, resume your seat. Your time has expired. Order. 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 Senator Shoebridge.
Thank you, President. My question is to Minister Watts, representing the Minister for Industrial Relations. Minister, the federal government and SafeWork have been on notice about the deadly health impacts posed by manufactured stone since at least 2019, when the matter was canvassed extensively in a New South Wales parliamentary inquiry and the press. We know too many workers are dying slow, painful deaths from silicosis. Recognising that it took us too long to act on James Hardie, why does SafeWork still say high silica manufactured stone can be used safely and still refuse to support a ban on this deadly product?
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Minister.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Shoebridge. And I know this is an issue you've had a long-standing interest in, as have many of us who've been concerned about worker safety, particularly in the construction industry, where this applies most. And I agree with you, Senator Shoebridge. This is something that should have been dealt with a long, long time ago. A lot of people have been on notice that this is a problem and is a very serious health risk. I've heard it referred to as the asbestosis of this generation, and that is certainly what it looks like. And that's exactly why our government is taking action to finally fix this once and for all. As you would probably be aware, Senator Shoebridge, in late February, the 28th of February this year, Minister Burke, as the responsible minister, met with Work, Health and Safety ministers to consider SafeWork Australia's decision regulation impact statement to better manage the risks of silica dust within the workplace. At that meeting, ministers unanimously agreed to a national approach to dealing with the spike in silicosis and silica-related diseases in workers from harmful exposure of respirable crystalline silica. Ministers agreed to a range of reforms as a priority based on recommendations from SafeWork Australia, and they included the delivery of national awareness and behaviour change initiatives, stronger regulation of high-risk crystalline silica processes for all materials across all industries, and further analysis and consultation by SafeWork Australia on a prohibition on the use of engineered stone under the model workplace health and safety laws, including consideration of a licensing scheme for legacy and non-prohibited products to be completed within 6 months. Ministers also noted the Commonwealth's intent to explore an importation ban on engineered stone and its effects, and Minister Burke's department is now working with states and territories and other stakeholders as part of this scoping work. We recognise the need to act quickly, and ministers will meet again to discuss silicosis as soon as practicable.
Thank you,
after
Minister. The
SafeWork
time for
completes
answering
its
has
work.
expired. Senator Shoebridge, first supplementary.
Minister, the main provider of manufactured stone in Australia, Caesarstone, is a foreign corporation with no significant assets in the country, and since September 2020 has been unable to get insurance coverage for silicosis-related claims in Australia, while it's also facing dozens and dozens of claims from sick and dying Australian workers. What guarantee do you give to workers who become sick after working with this product that they will not be left high and dry if Caesarstone exits the market?
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Shoebridge. As I say, a range of issues concerning silicosis and the threat that it poses to workers in the construction industry, including those who unfortunately have contracted silicosis, are exactly the issues that Minister Burke is dealing with at the moment. And I understand that you're seeking an assurance or some information about what will happen to workers who become sick if Caesarstone were to exit the market. I'm not briefed on that precise matter, but I'm happy to provide you with some information about that.
Thank you, Senator. Minister Watt. Senator Shoebridge, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. I note that the statements about taking action, and to some extent that's positive. But the best estimates we're hearing from the minister is this could be 6 to 12 months before a ban is put in place. So What do you say to the families of those workers who are getting sick now, waiting for a ban to finally happen, and being told again, we're going to the beat of safe work, and it's too hard to do it now, and that industry controls are sufficient? What do you say about the failure to get a ban now?
Your time has expired. Senator Watt.
Thanks, President. Thanks, Senator Shoebridge. I don't think that anyone, or certainly no one within our government, is saying that the current controls are sufficient. And that's exactly why Minister Burke is leading this work nationally, involving all state and territory ministers. I think it is not just unfortunate, but a grave dereliction of duty from the former government to have been in power for nearly 10 years while this information was publicly available and did nothing about it. And within the first 12 months of our government, we are actually taking action. So what I say to the families of those workers who are getting sick now is that they do now have a government in the Albanese Labor government who takes these issues seriously and is actually taking action. Well, Senator Hedges and Anderson, it would have been good if you'd spoken up at some point, at any point while you were in government, to ensure that this was done. But now that we are in government, we are taking action on it, and the sooner that can happen, the better.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Bilyk.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Education, Senator Watt. Can the minister outline why international education is important to our economy and building relationships with other countries?
Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Bilyk. And I know you're a very strong supporter of the international education industry in your home state of Tasmania and right around the country. A strong international education sector is an important contributor to the Australian economy. It's in fact the biggest export that we don't dig out of the ground, but of course this industry was absolutely smashed by COVID. In 2019, international education contributed over $40 billion to the Australian economy and supported over 250,000 jobs. The pandemic saw that fall to $20.8 billion in 2021-22, so nearly halved. International education has recently returned to being Australia's fourth biggest export industry, now worth $25.5 billion, but obviously there's still a very large gap between where we were before COVID came along. International education also plays a role in filling Australia's skill needs, with high-quality graduates trained to Australian standards. Our government's work to reduce the visa backlog, another mess we inherited from the former government, and increase post-study work rights will help attract the best and brightest to Australian shores. International students are starting to come back, and that's a very good thing, but there is a lot more work to be done here. And that's why the work that the Minister for Education, Jason Clare, has done and the Prime Minister is doing in India right now is so important. International education directly progresses Australia's interests in a stable and prosperous future for our region. The deep and enduring connections that result from international students studying and living in Australia brings more than revenue, it builds us friends in the region and beyond. International students help to strengthen Australia's international relationships. They are an invaluable part of Australian communities, bringing new perspectives, ideas and skills to enrich the cultural fabric of our society. Education plays a key role in building cultural diversity and people-to-people links around the world. It also ensures regional stability, and that's some of the many reasons why our government is supporting it.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Bilyk, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Can you provide an update on what the Albanese government is doing to strengthen higher education ties with India?
Minister.
Thank you, President. And yes, I can, Senator Bilyk. As you would be aware, our government takes the relationship between Australia and India very seriously, and that is a strong and important relationship for our future. I know that's certainly the case in my own portfolio of agriculture, and the recently signed free trade agreement with India opens lots of new markets for agricultural producers in India. But I think that education is also a big part of the reason why this relationship is continuing to grow. The Prime Minister's announcement overnight that Deakin University will be the first overseas university approved to build a campus in India is proof of the strength of our relationship, and I'm sure all Victorian senators in particular are very proud of that. The Minister for Education's visit last week— thank you, Senator Ciccone. The Minister for Education's visit last week to sign the new mutual recognition agreement is further proof of that. It delivers an immediate benefit to the hundreds of thousands of Indians with Australian qualifications and to anyone with Australian and Indian qualifications that wants to continue their higher education. This agreement was the broadest that India has signed with another country.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Bilyk, second supplementary.
Minister, what are the benefits to Australia of the work the Prime Minister is doing on higher education in India?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Bilyk, and I'll just clear my throat, as Senator Farrell is wont to do. Our relationship with India presents massive opportunities for Australia, both for our economy and for the people, links it generates. The Indian government has a plan to increase its higher education enrolments to 50% of young people by 2035. The quality of our universities and the strength of our relationship has led India to ask for our help in getting this huge undertaking done. Following recent visits, we will see more Australian education providers established in India. The University of Wollongong and Deakin University have committed to establish campuses in Gujarat and will be education partners for the many companies operating in Gift City and surrounds. RMIT University and the Birla Institute of Technology, Palani, signed an agreement, and there are 11 memoranda of understanding signed between Australian universities and Indian counterparts. We're going to do a lot more in this space. It's really important.
Your time has expired. Senator Tyrrell.
Thank you, President. I appreciate it. My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Industry, and I believe it's Senator Watt. The Albanese government has earmarked up to $3 billion from the National Reconstruction Fund for investment in renewables and low-emissions technologies. The Clean Energy Finance Corporation's investment mandate for its $10 billion is to invest in, quote, renewable energy, low emissions and energy efficiency projects and technologies, end quote. My question is, what can the National Reconstruction Fund's $3 billion for renewables invest in that the CFC can't already do?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Watts.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Tyrrell. As I understand it, you're yet to finalise your position in relation to the National Reconstruction Fund, so I do hope that the information that I provide you can convince you that this is something worth getting behind. The little I know about you, because we haven't spent a lot of time together, I do know that you're a big supporter of manufacturing, particularly in your home state of Tasmania, and the National Reconstruction Fund will be a key way to take manufacturing in that great state forward. I know Senator Urquhart has a lot of history in Tasmanian manufacturing, and I'm sure, Senator Tyrrell, you'll support that as well when we come down to it. The short answer to your question, Senator Tyrrell, is that the National Reconstruction Fund is going to be very focused on manufacturing, and a good example of that in the renewable space might be a smelter, whether it be Bell Bay or anywhere else in Tasmania, or another manufacturing facility that might wish to change its energy sources to become more reliant on renewable energies as a way of reducing their energy costs. That is the type of thing that we would expect a company would be able to apply to the National Reconstruction Fund for co-investment. And if the right rate of return was available, then the NRF would be able to support that. It's a bit different to the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, I guess, because that is much more focused on funding new innovation in the renewable energy space, so around the production of renewable energy and how we can do that through new and innovative means. So National Reconstruction Fund, much more focused on manufacturing facilities, how to upgrade them, how to bring more value-adding, how to reduce their energy costs, rather than the CEFC, which is more about how can we develop more renewable energy, which could then be used to supply to manufacturing facilities. But as I say, Senator Tyrrell, we think that it's it will make a massive difference for manufacturing in our country and in your state of Tasmania. So I do hope that when it comes time to the vote, you'll support us.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Tyrrell, first supplementary. Order. Order. Senator Ayres and others. Senator Tyrrell.
Thanks, President. The Medical Research Endowment Account is investing $3.5 billion in health and medical research. The $20 billion Medical Research Future Fund invests in commercialising those new medical technologies. Can the minister give an example of something the National Reconstruction Fund's $1.5 billion for medical science can invest in that the government's other investment vehicles can't already invest in?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Watt.
Thanks, Senator Tyrrell. My understanding, bearing in mind I'm a representing minister, is that the answer is essentially the same. If what I'm about to say is not entirely correct, I'm obviously happy to give you the precise information. But my understanding is that, just as with clean energy, the National Reconstruction Fund will be focused on medical manufacturing whether that be the manufacturing of pharmaceuticals, of medical devices, vaccines, or the actual manufacturing process, and how that can be done more efficiently, generating more jobs and more profits in states like yours. Whereas the medical research fund that you were talking about is more focused on funding the research for discovery of new vaccines, of new medicines and things like that, rather than actually manufacturing them. So I guess the National Reconstruction Fund can take those discoveries one step further, and rather than having great medical discoveries here in Australia that then get manufactured overseas, we can make more things here in Australia, which we agree with. Unfortunately, there's a few people over there who don't.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Tyrrell, second supplementary.
Okay. The Albanese government has earmarked a further $1 billion from the NRF towards advanced manufacturing and a separate $1 billion for critical technologies. But your critical technologies list includes advanced manufacturing as a category of critical technology. It's the first category. You've decided to set up separate buckets of money for different things, but $1 spent in the first counts as $1 spent in the second. Do you see how that might be confusing?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Again, I might need to get a little bit more information to fully answer your question, but my understanding is that the critical technologies list is under review, hasn't been finalised. There's obviously a consultation process that has been going through in the creation of this fund, the settling of guidelines as to the types of things that it can be invested in, that can be used to invest in, and I'm sure that if there is any lack of clarity there, that will be tidied up through the review process. While I'm on my feet, though, I do want to just point out that this is going to be a really important vote for our country when we come to vote on this legislation. I'm pleased to see that the Greens have now announced that they will be supporting that legislation. I think the crossbench are still working out their position, and we'd be happy to work with you on that. But there's actually two groups, the Liberals and the Nationals, who are completely opposed to this, and that for all the time they run around dressing in high-vis, pretending to care about manufacturing and smearing a bit of grease on their face, when it comes to the crunch they vote against it. That's a disgrace, and they should hang their heads in shame.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Your time has expired. Senator O'Sullivan.
Thank you very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Minister, on Monday this week, in response to a question from Senator Bragg, you said, and I quote, "Because of the nature of defined benefits, they will be included in the scheme." And we announced that when we announced the measure. We expect that the changes will definitely cover defined benefit schemes, and there are a couple of areas that we are going to consult on and that we want some industry advice on. Can the minister confirm that veterans who are eligible to access a defined benefit scheme will be caught up in Labor's new super tax?
Thank you, Senator O'Sullivan. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think, because I've been dealing with these questions all week, and I would point out to the chamber that the coalition closed the defined benefit superannuation scheme for the military in 2015, but we have been clear. That defined benefit schemes will be part of this change. We said that when we announced it, and we will consult with the sector on implementation. And I welcome the opportunity to go through, and I think I might start with the member for Hume's comments about which relates to high balance accounts back in 2016. Well, it's very simple. We need a fairer superannuation system which has integrity, and this means that those of us who can afford to pay should be paying our fair share. The situation we had was some people were contributing millions of dollars into super, and it's totally inappropriate that someone who's contributed millions and millions of dollars continues to get 15% concessions. That was the member for Hume in 2016. That was the member for Hume in 2016. And now we've got a sensible, modest, responsible change that deals with fairness and equity in the superannuation system. And those opposite, the party of the member for Hume, all of a sudden are going to die on a hill for a less concessional arrangement for 0.5% of people who are fortunate enough to have more than $3 million in their super account. That is the state of the Liberal Party. As we work towards some sensible budget repair, some modest changes, the no coalition, making themselves
Minister,
irrelevant,
your time
say
has
no.
expired. Just order. Order. Senator Hume, your constant interjections are disorderly, and I called you to order a number of times. I expect you to come to order. Senator O'Sullivan, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, given your answer, will you rule out applying the tax to veterans who accessed a defined benefit scheme prior to 2015?
Minister.
The policy that we've announced and will be reflected in the budget applies to 0.5% of people who have more than $3 million in their superannuation account. Okay? In their superannuation account. Now, we are looking at how we apply it to defined benefit schemes.
Order.
We are looking at how we do it.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Wong and others. Minister, please continue.
As I said earlier this week, and as I've just repeated, we've been clear that we want this to apply to defined benefit scheme as well. If you are fortunate enough to have $3 million in your super account, we think that applying a less concessional arrangement, still highly concessional, just less than is currently available, so 30% instead of 15%, that raising a very modest $2 billion when it's fully operational
Thank you,
to
Minister.
contribute
Your time
to
has
budget
expired.
repair.
Senator O'Sullivan, second supplementary.
Thank you for that very revealing answer. Why is Labor, therefore, going after veterans and attempting to tax them on earnings that they won't receive until they retire?
I'm waiting for order before I call the minister. Senator Wong. Order. Minister.
The average super balance in this country is $150,000. That is the average super balance in this country. For women, it is less than that. The average superannuation balance is $140,000.
Order. Senator Wong. Minister.
We are not going after anyone. We are implementing a sensible change. Well, we are implementing. I wish you got so exercised about all the other issues facing the country, like the state of the budget that we inherited, for example, might be one of them.
Senator
how
Green.
we fund some of those pressures that we've inherited. All of those zombie measures that you left there for years propping up your budget, your terminating measures.
Senator Henderson.
What about energy bill relief? Why didn't you care about that? Well, why didn't you care about that? You voted no.
Minister.
You voted no.
Minister,
we were
please
here.
resume your seat. Minister. Minister. Order. 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 Minister Gallagher. This is the second time this week that this chamber has been so disorderly. You have not heard me say order on a number of times. It's question time. It is disorderly and disrespectful to continue to call out, and to call out so loudly that my saying order is drowned out. It's question time. I expect senators to respect that. Senator Babet.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Health Minister, Minister Gallagher. We meet again, Minister Gallagher. Last time we conversed in this chamber, you said in relation to COVID-19 vaccines, and I quote, "It's not just an individual decision. This is the thing. It's not just about an individual's decision and keeping yourself safe. It's keeping other people safe from this virus. People who aren't able to be as protected as some of us. It's actually a community responsibility to be vaccinated." You also repeated this during Senate estimates. Minister, can you please advise what evidence you have relied upon to justify your statements regarding mRNA vaccinations and their effectiveness against transmission of the currently circulating COVID strain? Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Senator Babet. Minister.
Thank you, and I thank the senator for the question and also for the advice that early advice that he was going to ask a question about the vaccine or about COVID-19. By getting vaccinated and staying up to date with booster doses, people are helping to protect their communities. They do this by reducing their own risk of serious and severe disease, and they are reducing the potential burden on their local health service and maintaining their ability to work and provide care for others. At the initial stage of the pandemic, there was also the push through the vaccination program to ensure essentially a herd immunity to the virus, which is similar to the approach that we take with the other vaccination programs. And my comments relate to that. Anyone who undertakes a vaccination for a particular illness or disease is doing it as a member of a community, because quite often those diseases won't necessarily give us severe illness, but for those who are vulnerable, for those who are immunocompromised, they could be affected. And so I do see vaccination as a community responsibility. And there is no doubt that by having the vaccines, it is preventing serious disease from occurring to people and preventing deaths, and has been instrumental in allowing society to open both socially and economically. Murray.
Before I call Senator Babet, I'll remind senators once again that the conversations across the chamber are disorderly. And it is Senator Babet's opportunity to ask questions and for the minister to respond. Senator Babet, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. So we've now had over 11 million COVID cases that have been reported in Australia, and most Australians by now have some level of natural immunity or they've been vaccinated. Now, even New South Wales Premier Mr Dominic Perrottet recently said that there's no evidence that vaccines prevent transmission or impact transmission. Potentially, I think you may have misled the Senate. Now, let's go back to the very start, specifically Pfizer. Did Pfizer test whether the COVID-19 vaccine prevented transmission before rolling it out?
Thank you, Senator Babet. Senator Ayres, I've called you to order a number of times during question time. I'm asking you to respect when I call you to order and not continue to call out. Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, President. On the issue of Pfizer and whether the vaccine was tested for in response to its ability to prevent community transmission, I will have to take that on notice. Happy to come back. But it was. I think we do have to understand that the approval processes for these vaccines were done very quickly in the eye of a pandemic. They followed the safety procedures as required, and the TGA had a rigorous assessment process for approval of those vaccines. And there is no doubt that the vaccines have helped prevent serious illness and death in thousands and thousands of Australians. I think you're very fortunate if you've had COVID and you haven't had serious disease and it hasn't required hospitalisation or caused your death. But failing to vaccinate people would have resulted in a lot more deaths.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Babet, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Obviously, you failed to answer my question there, but I believe that your government continues to fail many Australians by not outlawing vaccine mandates. Now, you've got an opportunity here to make up for the previous government's failure, the previous Liberal government's mistakes. So I'll ask you one more time, do you believe that you've misled the Senate around your comments regarding community responsibility and the vaccines? Are you willing to retract those comments?
Minister.
Thank you, President. I don't believe I have misled the Senate, and I take the remarks I make in this place really seriously, around that. I do believe that vaccination is a community responsibility. I do believe it. If we all went around unvaccinated, there would be a whole range of diseases and illnesses in this country. And whilst it might not affect many of us in this chamber, although it would affect some of us, if you are immunocompromised, then The fact that people aren't vaccinated could have a significant and serious effect on your own health. Like that is the reality. That's the approach we take with the childhood vaccination program. It's the approach that we've taken with the pandemic, and there is no doubt. And despite Senator Rennick's interjections, there is evidence, because the mortality rate from COVID is significantly reduced now that we have a highly vaccinated population. The evidence is in on that.
Senator Rennick, I've called you to order a number of times. There's ample opportunity during the week for you to put your opinion about a whole variety of questions and matters. Question time is not one of those. Senator Pratt.
They don't let you ask questions.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Can the Minister please update the Senate on how the committee is on how the government is ensuring Australia's biggest emitters contribute their fair share towards emission reductions?
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Senator Watt. That's Minister Wong. Sorry.
Thank you, President, and thank you to Senator Pratt for her question and for her advocacy over many, many years, like many on this side, for action on climate. And the government safeguard mechanism reforms are really the first chance in over a decade for us to implement climate action that gets us towards net zero. And that's really the important thing: is how do we get towards the target? How do we get to the targets that have been set? That I thought that the opposition supported, but more about them shortly. And Australian businesses are pleading for it, because they know that reducing emissions is essential to their long-term competitiveness in a global net zero economy. We want to deliver sensible pro-climate reforms that the Australian people voted for and that business needs so they can reduce emissions. But those opposite, and really I think Senator Canavan is demonstrating it now, they oppose reforms because there is a pathology of political conflict over there. You're not interested in solutions. You're not actually interested in reducing emissions. You're not interested in actually having a mechanism which enables the market to have certainty so we can deliver net zero, which supposedly you support in principle. You're not interested in that. But you are interested in having conflict. The same old fights reheated for 2023. But of course you have to ask the opposition, who are they actually fighting for? Who are you actually fighting for? You're not fighting for business. You're not fighting for businesses, because we know the business community support it. You're not fighting for working Australians. You oppose both new jobs and secure jobs, whether it's the minimum.
Thank you. Please continue, Senator Wong.
You're not fighting for working Australians. You oppose new jobs in your opposition to the National Reconstruction Fund, and you oppose a boost to the minimum wage. And you're not fighting for families because you voted no to energy price relief just weeks before Christmas. So the question to you is, whose side are you on?
Your time for answering has expired. I'm going to wait until there's silence before I call Senator Pratt. Senator McKenzie. It seems to be a habit of yours that the minute I call order, you continue to call out. Senator Pratt, first supplementary.
President, can the minister highlight the opportunities presented by the Albanese government's plans and what the potential costs of squandering those opportunities would be?
Minister Watt. Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Pratt, and you're right. These are plans where there is a great deal of cost to all of us across the economy, across the community, if those opportunities are squandered. And I'd remind the chamber that the proposed reforms to the safeguard mechanism have been carefully designed, following nearly 6 months of consultation, and it has broad support across the community. And if I could go back to my first answer, which is, who are the, what are you fighting for? Because you're fighting against business, you're fighting against working families, you're fighting against those on the minimum wage. But they're actually even fighting themselves. They're actually fighting themselves because these are reforms that were first proposed by Mr Taylor, these are the same reforms that your party room signed off, and you're so determined to pick a fight, you're actually fighting against your own policy. So determined to pick a fight,
Thank you,
you're
Senator
even
Wong.
fighting against your own policy.
Expired. Order. Order. Senator Watt and Senator Rennick. Senator Pratt, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Can the minister please outline the impact of the Albanese government's proposed reforms and the impact that will have on certainty of investment and what threats there may be to that certainty? Thank you.
Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Thank you to Senator Pratt. And we on this side of the chamber understand that without certainty the market doesn't move. And if you want a demonstration of that, you can see the 22 failed policies of those opposite, and the way that smashed investment in the generation sector. And businesses know that. And I refer to recent media this week where there was a headline in the AFR saying coalition blocking the best shot at net zero success, where it was reported that big business has urged the federal opposition to back the government safeguard mechanism requiring big polluters to bring down emissions, warning a lack of bipartisan support could jeopardise the enormous private investment.
Minister Wong, order. I have a senator on his feet. Order. Senator Watt.
Point of order, President. I just draw your attention to the fact that Senator Rennick continues to try to disrupt the procedures, despite your repeated request not to.
Senator Watt, order. Senator Watt. Senator Watt, order. That is not a point of order. Minister Wong, please continue.
I can't remember where I was. So what we have is business themselves saying that your lack of bipartisan support could jeopardise, and I quote, the enormous private investment needed for the clean energy transition. I mean, you are seeking to again to just be
Senator
reckless.
Wong, your time has
reckless.
expired. Senator Patterson, first.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs and Cyber Security, Senator Watt. The European Union, Canada, the United States and other jurisdictions have banned TikTok on government devices because they regard the risk posed by the app as unacceptable. Overnight, the Director of the FBI reaffirmed the serious threat of backdoor espionage and interference from TikTok. Of 53 Australian government departments and agencies who responded, only 25, less than half, confirmed an outright ban. Why has the Albanese government not followed our like-minded partners and banned the app on government devices?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Patterson. It is interesting. I recognise that Senator Patterson is someone here who does take issues of cybersecurity and national security seriously, but I can't help noticing that he and all of his colleagues have taken a lot more interest in these issues since they entered opposition than they ever did when they were in power and had the opportunity to do so. I also observed that poor old Senator Rennick up the back there, he never seems to get a question, and maybe one day he'll get the opportunity to ask questions as well. The fact is that since our government, the Albanese government, has been in power, we have absolutely lifted the game of the Australian government when it comes to cybersecurity to move beyond the derelict system that was left behind by the former government. The Albanese government is committed to ensuring all Australians are aware of the challenges of protecting themselves online. And as I say, all the people who now have all the questions in the world had ample opportunity to do something about this issue themselves as members of a nearly 10-year-old government that ended only a few months ago. It wasn't that long ago that Senator Patterson was asking me questions about the cameras that are in departmental buildings, and again, something that the former government not only could have done something about, but maybe could have stopped happening in the first place. So I welcome this newfound interest in these issues from members of the opposition, including Senator Patterson, and I would welcome the support of the opposition to the reforms that this government is putting in place.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Patterson.
On relevance, Madam President, my question was about TikTok. We're 1 minute and 30 seconds into the minister's answer, and the word TikTok has not passed his lips.
Thank you, Senator Patterson. I am going to direct the minister to the question, but I'll go to Senator Wong.
If you've made the order, there's no point.
Minister, Senator Patterson asked specific questions about government departments in relation to TikTok, and I need you to be relevant to that question. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Well, as I think Senator Patterson is aware, the Minister for Home Affairs is conducting a review of all social media platforms, and the government will consider the recommendations of that review. A review, I might say, never occurred under the former government. The concerns regarding TikTok are not new, and they've been in public for some time. And again, there could have been something done about this by the former government if they thought that it was actually a concern. But as I say, the minister is conducting this review. The Attorney-General has also requested advice on whether a government-wide ban is required to address protected
thank you, Minister
security
Watt.
risks.
Your time has expired. Senator Patterson, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. In July last year, TikTok Australia first admitted in a letter to me that Australian TikTok user data can be accessed in China. In December, the company admitted to using the app to spy on journalists. Why has the Albanese government failed to act for 8 months on this important cybersecurity matter?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister.
Seriously, why have we not acted within 8 months when you're part of a government that was in power for nearly 10 years? And you know, why were you asleep at the wheel on these issues amongst
Minister
everything
Watt,
else for
Minister
nearly
Watt,
8 years?
Please resume your seat. Order. 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 Senator Patterson is entitled to have his question answered, and I would ask you on my left in particular to respect the quiet. Minister.
Thank you, President. Unlike the succession of failed former coalition governments, the Albanese Labor government is taking a considered, deliberate approach to better regulating how digital platforms access and store consumer information. The Minister for Home Affairs has asked her department to consider all options to address data access and usage concerns as they relate to TikTok and other social media companies. I don't recall the former government ever doing that, but this minister and this government has done so. The concerns about the security of Australians' data on social media are well known, and they are not limited to TikTok. Current policy and legislative settings do not give Australians the information or the confidence that their personal data is being protected and stored securely, and we're doing something about it.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Patterson, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Will the minister commit to a timeframe to ban TikTok from government devices?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister.
Well, as I say, the minister is undertaking that review, but what I can guarantee you is that this government will do something about this well within the nearly 10 years, the timeline that your government sat on its hands and did nothing about these things. I truly hope that we are in power for that sort of length of time. But however long it takes, we're going to get this done. We've already started work on it within our first 12 months in office, as opposed to the former government, which did absolutely nothing for nearly 10 years, and all of a sudden has become wise after the fact. If only you'd had this sort of insight when you were in government. If only. But 10 years went by, nothing was done, and now, yet again, mess that we've got to clean up. So I have every confidence that this minister and this government will take action as quickly as possible to address these issues. The reviews are underway. The Attorney-General is seeking advice, things that never occurred under the former government. We take national security seriously, we take cyber security seriously, and that's why we're acting on it.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Sheldon.
My question is to the Minister for Emergency Management, Senator Watt. Last year, nearly 70% of Australians lived in a natural disaster zone. Can the minister outline what steps the Albanese government is taking to make sure Australians are better prepared and better protected for natural disasters?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you again, Senator Sheldon, for another question on an issue that I know you're very interested in and work very hard on. And I might, just before I directly answer the question, just note that yet again in Northern Australia we are facing some very serious rainfall, particularly in the Northern Territory and northwest Queensland over coming days, an area that I know Senator McDonald's very familiar with. Senator McGreen, I think, has spoken about this issue as well, and I know that all of our well wishes go to people in those areas to stay safe. Please remain aware of emergency warnings in coming days, and of course that famous slogan that too many people ignore: if it's flooded, forget it. So let's all take care over the coming days. But Senator Sheldon, as you know, the Albanese government knows that as Australia faces more intense and more frequent natural disasters due to climate change, we need to be better prepared. And that's why we've established the Disaster Ready Fund, our flagship disaster resilience and mitigation fund. The Disaster Ready Fund will invest up to $200 million in federal funding every year in disaster mitigation and resilience measures, and where possible that funding will be matched by states, territories and local governments where they are partners in these projects. Now, these measures that this fund will provide the funding for could be used for everything from seawalls to evacuation centres and drainage improvements to things like community preparedness plans and training programs. And I'm pleased to say that applications for the first round of our new Disaster Ready Fund closed on Monday this week, and they are now being assessed by an independent panel. Now, that funding won't become available until the 1st of July this year, but we've deliberately got moving quickly early in this year so that we're ready to go once that timeframe arrives. We also know that we need targeted support for communities still recovering from the devastating 2022 February-March floods, along with all of the other floods that we saw last year. As I mentioned earlier this week, we recently announced the first phase of funding for the Northern Rivers, and there's going to be a lot more to come because mitigation matters.
Minister Watt, your time has expired. Senator Sheldon, first supplementary.
Can the minister outline how the Albanese government's approach to disaster preparedness compares to previous Commonwealth government approaches?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Well, I can, and 1 minute will absolutely be enough time to outline the Albanese government's approach and how that compares to what we saw from the former government. In fact, I could really just mention the former government's approach very quickly because the answer is not much. Who could forget the former government's infamous nearly $5 billion emergency response fund? Established in 2019, in 3 years the Coalition's Emergency Response Fund didn't release a single cent in recovery funding and didn't complete a single mitigation project. What it did do, of course, was raise nearly $1 billion in interest for the former government, while actually doing nothing to assist Australians with disaster mitigation or disaster recovery. Now, who knows what kind of damage could have been avoided, what kind of loss could have been avoided if the former government had used that fund in the way it was constructed to provide for mitigation. Unlike the former government, the Albanese government believes in planning for future events, not waiting for them to happen.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Your time has expired. Senator Sheldon, second supplementary.
Can the minister outline any threats to the Albanese government's commitment to ensuring Australians are better prepared and better protected from natural disasters before they become humanitarian disasters?
Sorry, Senator Sheldon. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you again, Senator Sheldon. Now, we have known for years that the federal government has needed to significantly increase its investment in protecting communities from natural disasters. All the way back in 2015, the Productivity Commission recommended that the federal government should invest $200 million every year in disaster mitigation and resilience across Australia. But what did the former coalition government do? Absolutely nothing, as we saw in so many other areas of policy. For years, they ignored the advice of the Productivity Commission before eventually setting up this Emergency Response Fund, which failed to release a single cent in recovery funding and didn't complete a single mitigation project. In fact, when the legislation was being passed to create the then Emergency Response Fund, the only reason it even provided for mitigation funding was because Labor insisted on it as an amendment when we were still in opposition. So it's no wonder that we have such a big backlog of mitigation projects right around the country. We're starting to work through that backlog with the Disaster Ready Fund, and I look forward to working with states and territories to implement it.
Your time has expired. Senator Wong.
Thank you, President. I ask that further questions be placed on notice.
Thank you.